Bringing attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Hi everyone, this is Andy Steele. Thanks again for listening. Today Bernie Suarez is back as my guest to talk about what he's been up to and offer his commentary on the year in 9/11 truth in this, the very last show of 2013. This is a long interview, so I'll be playing that for you in just a few minutes. But before I do, I want to read to you the following action alert that came out from rethink911.org earlier this week. The subject of this action alert was a call that was made to Washington Journal to David Sanger. He's the chief Washington correspondent at the New York Times, and of course that's the paper that right now has a billboard up across the street from it, put there by the Rethink 9/11 campaign that's calling out the New York Times for its shoddy coverage of the issues surrounding Building 7 and all the scientific evidence pointing to the fact that it was brought down in a controlled demolition on September 11th. This call happened on December 22nd, and I don't have time to play that clip for you right now on this episode, but the video of it is up on rethink911.org's YouTube page, and I'll have that provided also on 911freefall.com for all of you to see. So you can go there right now and check that out. But the call was from a guy whose father was in one of the Twin Towers on 9/11. He opens up the call by discussing that. And then he asks Sanger what rational and scientific basis the New York Times has for failing to fairly and objectively cover the important issue of Building 7. And of course he mentions the billboard that's across the street from their headquarters there. So the action alert reads as follows. The headline is, "Tell the New York Times the evidence isn't hard to find if you look." And the article says, yesterday, New York Times chief Washington correspondent David Sanger was the guest on C-SPAN's Washington Journal, where he had this to say about Building 7's collapse. "We have not found any evidence so far. That doesn't mean there's none there, but we've not found any evidence so far to suggest that the building collapses were caused by anything other than the 2 airplanes that flew into them." Sanger was responding to a question from a caller who wanted to know why, despite the massive billboard standing right outside the New York Times building, the paper of record had failed to fairly and objectively cover this crucial issue. Now, with the senior representative of the New York Times on the record saying we've not found any evidence so far, it is time to let Mr. Sanger and the editors know that the evidence is there. All they need to do is look and they'll easily find it. Contact the New York Times today. Last week, over 1,000 people contacted the BBC in response to our action alert regarding the BBC's one-sided article on the Rethink 9/11 campaign. Let's surpass that level of support today. Please take 2 minutes right now to contact David Sanger and the New York Times editors. Just copy, paste the letter below, or write your own, and please be sure to BCC us at AE911Truth so that we can keep account of how many emails are sent. Contact the New York Times today. So there you go, folks. I'll have a copy of that action alert up at 911 Freefall also, 911freefall.com, so you can take a look at it and you can copy and paste the letter yourself. And again, like the action alert says, just take 2 minutes out of your day and write to the email addresses that are listed in the action alert there and let them know what you think of Mr. Sanger's answer and the fact that New York Times has not adequately covered this. There's been articles talking about Building 7, but when they discuss controlled demolition, they use the same kind of snotty, dismissive tone and words like conspiracy theorist and just reinforcing the official story that has already been thoroughly debunked by architects and engineers for 9/11 truth. So you got to hold their feet to the fire and you got to let them know that they are not going to get away with this any longer. The people are awakening, and if they want to stay relevant, if they want to stay the paper of record, they are going to need to address this. Okay, before I play my interview with Bernie Suarez, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all of the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that starting now. And that is 10 seconds. veteran activist for 9/11 Truth and several other related issues. He's a member of We Are Change LA and a former co-host of this very show. He's been a busy person this year, but he's back today for the very last show of 2013, and I am honored to have him back here. Bernie, welcome back to 9/11 Freefall.
Hey, thank you very much, Andy Steele. And yeah, it is. I'm delighted to be back on 9/11 Freefall, and it's great to hear your voice and see how everyone is marching forward with this issue of 9/11. Things are continuing. Thank you for continuing the show. I hear you're having a good time with this show. I'm going to have to come back here. Well, I am. I'm back.
And if anyone's listening to this show for the first time or has just gotten into recent episodes, Bernie's the guy. He co-created the show with me. He helped design the format that I follow right to this day, with the moment of silence, the opening, everything. So this show's creation has as much of Bernie's hand on it as mine. So, again, thank you for that and for helping getting this off the ground. So we're going to start go ahead.
Well, hey, I was going to say, Andy, if I had a major task at hand, or if someone said, give you the hardest task out there and say, we have to find someone that's going to make it happen, I'll start with you. No, I appreciate, and as I'm sure a lot of people do, appreciate your ability to implement things and kind of just make it happen in one way or another. So thank you, too.
Well, it's funny, and when I came up with the idea that we should have a simple podcast, it was going to be a simple once a month podcast to kind of tell everybody what was going to happen, what was happening with AE 9/11 Truth, and somehow it became a once a week show up on what was that? What was the first network? It was the Worldwide Christian Radio that we ended up on somehow. And it was a once a week show, and we were just going to focus on 9/11, just on the science of 9/11 mostly, and that seemed like an arduous task. Many people didn't think we would succeed, but you jumped on board and you wanted to be a part of the creation of this, and you helped make it happen. And you stepped forward when a lot of people stepped back, so that's really great. So we're going to start this episode with a little segment that I call Solving the Mystery of Bernie Suarez. You want to tell our audience, what have you been up to since we heard from you last?
Well, Bernie's been just dealing with the world out there. For one thing, I've been back in school, and that, anybody who's been a student full-time, how much time that can take from your schedule. And I think we had spoken last year, or was it earlier this year, in January, or maybe last year in December, and I was bouncing around. And, I'm still around here. I'm on the West Coast, still keeping track on all the topics, but I have been studying different topics. I don't know if we mentioned it before. Obviously, I have a degree here, a graduate degree, so I'll be doing maybe going back into medicine here. I've been separated there for a while, but this year, I've been studying computer languages and all that, computer programming and all that. So you can imagine anyone who's done that, how much time that takes from your hand. But the mystery is solved. Here I am. I'm out, I guess like everyone else, trying to stay busy with a lot of different things, mostly academic.
Well, I just didn't want you to be Chet Cunningham from the Happy Days, just suddenly just disappeared and nobody knows where you went,
I'm busy out there. I've got my project, my website, and I stay busy writing articles, as you mentioned a minute ago, on other topics, as you I'm sure are aware, topics that interrelate with the 9/11 issue and the problems of the world. So on my site, you get a chance to read about other issues that all eventually connect right back to 9/11 in one way or another.
Right, and that's truthandarttv.com, right? It's .com?
Absolutely, and truthandarttv.com.
And that's with the and, like spelled out, truthandarttv.com. Okay,
that's right.
So, I don't think you've shared your awakening story on this show yet. You never got around to that as far as I remember. So tell our audience just a little more about yourself, how you woke up to the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence, and what prompted you to start speaking out about it.
Oh, well, my story's probably not anything great or anything special. I am, for years I've been in school, and I've always considered myself a scientific evidence kind of guy. Appreciation for the scientific methods, physics, chemistry, all this stuff. I have been to med school. I graduated from med school. I do have an MD degree. And, when you're working your way up in school that way, you are required to take years and years of science courses. So I was aware of the scientific method and all that. But like many people, when 9/11 happened, I just accepted it. I mean, I'm also a veteran. I was in the service for 4 years back in the 80s. And, I guess I would consider myself at the time more towards the right, I guess, or Republican supporter, and so I was a pro-military kind of guy. So it's definitely in favor of, I believe the official story, and I was in favor at the time of the war in Iraq, and I kind of, like a lot of pro-military kind of people, that was kind of my profile at the time, and for years, I had a few people tell me I should, someone suggested to me I should watch a movie called Loose Change. Back, I think it was 2003, I want to say, and I laughed this person off, like, yeah, right, come on, please, leave it alone. I believed the official story, and I defended it. And I said, look, maybe I'll check out the video sometime. Well, that maybe turned into 5 years later. Back in 2008, right about, I don't know, summertime of 2008, I want to say June, July, around there. I was on the East Coast. I had moved from the West Coast to the East Coast. So I was kind of, in my room one day, and I said, well, what's this movie? And I think I went online. I came across the film. I think I had bookmarked it, and I watched what many people have watched, is Loose Change, and I don't think I got half an hour or maybe an hour into the show, and I just slipped one item after another, and it just kind of started clicking right then and there. I guess, to make a long story short, that was really when my awakening, I guess you want to call it, began at that time, mid-2008 or more or less.
Now, you just did an AE 9/11 Truth tabling out there in Los Angeles. You want to tell our audience about it and about your experiences there?
Oh, well, what we've done, they're actually efforts put together by We Are Change. I have another partner, and a couple of us get together, and we've been doing these for years, where we put out information to the general public. Most of it is AE 9/11 Truth material for the most part, not all of it, but and we just kind of like in the AE style, architect engineer kind of style. We primarily stick to the science when we have these tablings, and we offer different flyers and for the general public, and we also we put together DVDs with certain films on it, which include 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out, among other films, Loose Change and some other films. And we kind of put a package together for the general public, and we give out free DVDs. These have always been, I guess you could say, very gratifying tables. It's always good to see people come around, or people that say, hey, I heard about this, can I get a free DVD? And we used to do these, Andy, years ago, and we had we experienced a lot of hostility at times from the general public, as you can imagine. But now, in 2013, people want this information. We don't get much opposition, at least not on the West Coast, and I'm sure people have different experiences. But for us, it's been very gratifying. We get to share the information with the general public. We have a couple of blocks that we use to demonstrate Newton's laws. The blocks are 4x4s, and it's kind of shaped like the World Trade Center. So they're cut right at more or less at the floors, and they're marked at exactly one of my partners who's out there with me all the time, Bob, who he's marked exactly. He figured out proportionately to where the impact zones of the two planes, and we use those impact zones. We mark them in Sharpies and all, and the block is cut at a certain point to align itself with one of the impact zones, and then we explain the top block versus the bottom block and show the audience how, a little apply Newton's laws and let them see the visual evidence of that. Of course, we also, yesterday we had, we'll play videos. Yesterday we were playing one of the David Chandler North Tower collapse videos repeatedly for the audience. That always seems to grab their attention. So we use the videos as well as the images that we have, the flyers and different posters, to show the audience the top portion of the building. We remind people about several things that you and I would speak about in the shows that we've had before, about the passing of the National Construction Safety Team Act of 2000, and explain to the audience, the scientific method, how the government conveniently passed this act that essentially gave them a platform to circumvent the scientific method, so that they don't have to show their evidence to the general public or the scientific community, for that matter. And you and I spoke about this, and it's common knowledge now, but the National Construction Safety Team Act is important to understand. So we covered that, as I said, the scientific method. We do demonstrations, and we have videos and all that. Very good success, good reactions from the people. We get to meet a lot of people, and we've been doing these for a while, and we had a great time yesterday.
And to our audience, the National Construction Safety Team Act, that is the justification that NIST uses to withhold the data for their World Trade Center 7 models. That they say that doing so somehow would jeopardize public safety. So that is what
Absolutely.
we're referring to. And, as we said many times on this show, I think the only safety that they're jeopardizing is their own, because once people look at this and the data gets a fair review under the microscope of public scrutiny, it's going to be torch and pitchfork time. It's over. For those folks, it's over anyway. And the people are waking up. A lot's happened this year, and it's the last episode of 2013, and our audience has not heard any of your commentary on a lot of stuff that's gone on this year. So we're going to start with a couple of them. I want to get your take on it.
Sure.
Things that have happened. Rethink 9/11, the billboard out in New York City, and all the other ads in the cities around the world. Obviously you must have caught this. What's your insight on it?
I love it. I think I contacted the team of Richard and whoever. I guess they have an email connected to it. So yeah, I love it. It got my attention. This is the way to go. I've always, when I was on the show with you, remember we spoke about all the time. I'm a big advocate. One of my backgrounds is in psychology. I constantly harp to people and remind people, and I'll remind your audience here about some of the history of what we know, the history of propaganda, and the whole thing with Edward Bernays, who was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. People, many of the listeners may know about this, and this whole thing is about marketing and propaganda and getting information out to the general public and the masses and swaying the masses. So now that the 9/11 Truth Movement is able to get large billboards and get messages to the masses, what we're doing is we're essentially jumping into the game and giving them a taste of their own medicine. They rely, we get opposition for 9/11 opposition because people listen to government propaganda and because they're swayed by billboards, by TV shows, books, magazines, all these messages that we are subjected to nowadays. And I argue for long that all of this, to understand the impact of these messages and propaganda and all this kind of media bombardment of the human mind that's going on now, goes back to understanding the history of what propaganda is and and the knowledge that was obtained over 100 years ago and brought to America by Edward Bernays of this idea, and who I believe founded the Department of Propaganda for the CIA. And I believe one of the very first things they did was change the name of the word propaganda. They stopped using that and they started using public relations. That sounds a lot better, right, than propaganda. So yeah, these billboards are just exactly where I feel that we needed to go, and I hope this type of messaging and advertisement of the truth of 9/11 continues. We can't have enough of this. People will respond to these billboards. You're basically hitting them in the very same way, using the very same techniques that they use to brainwash Americans into believing, or in some cases just to lure them into buying products they don't need, or whatever it may be. So yeah, I'm very happy about the billboards. I hope they continue. I'm just imagining when I saw the first billboard, I'm thinking, oh my God, Andy Steele is at it again. He's pushing, making things happen there at the AE. Am I right about that?
Well, I wasn't behind the billboards. That we had some great volunteers involved with that. We've had them on the show, folks. I probably can't even list enough of them, like Ted Walter, Mike Figa, Pam Senzi was involved, and I wasn't involved with Rethink, but I'm very happy to have been able to interview these folks and to be there. We have one of our episodes right after the rally that took place in New York City is just the speeches from that day, because it was an amazing rally that took place there. We had so many great speakers, so many great people that showed up. RT came out before the rally to interview Richard Gage right in front of the billboard. So a lot of success with that and getting the word out. And again, it wasn't just in New York City. It was all over the world. We had our reach was global, and especially over in Canada. And it was a successful campaign there. There was but there was controversy in Ottawa, the capital. A member of the Ottawa City Council got a little miffed and claimed that the bus ads were disrespectful. And this resulted in members of Rethink 9/11 going before the city council there and basically debunking her. We had David Long was there. He read a statement for himself and for Bob McIlvaine, who, of course, lost his son Bobby that day in one of the towers. And that debunked the whole insensitive to the victims' families aspect of this woman's argument. And we had another woman who from Rethink 9/11 who went up and read her statement, and it included a video of Building 7 falling and being played on the council floor for the entire council to see. And of course it was recorded. And this was a big deal that this happened. And essentially the council ruled that this councilwoman was wasting their time because she wanted them to review the bus the city transpose ad policy so that it could never happen again, so that this kind of campaign couldn't happen again. They essentially told her they were wasting her time. Now I'm not sure if this is the first that you're hearing about that, but this claim that it's insensitive to the victims' family members. It's easy to debunk now by reality, but are you still hearing this? And when you're reaching out and doing your own activism and talking to people?
We do occasionally hear that. I guess the resistance to the message, in my perception at least, is decreased, whereas there's more of a quietness amongst those that may not agree with us yet. They're kind of silent, but we still get occasionally some people who disagree with us. We had outreach yesterday. We had one individual who he said he was a firefighter in New York at the time. Some of us, we weren't quite sure how true that was, but maybe it was. And the guy he reacted what it seemed to be very emotionally impulsive, and he basically said, "I was there." And when I showed him some of the evidence, and his only defense was, "I was there." So I think it's gone from you're being insensitive to the families to I was there for some people, and that's good enough. That's enough of a defense. But I'm being a little kind of joking there. But I don't. We don't hear it as much, but it's still out there. People still resort to this. I'm sure, as you can see.
Right, and one time on C-SPAN, there was somebody who had written a book, was asked about the Building 7 or something about the Twin Towers by a caller, and his response was, "I had an office in the World Trade Center." He didn't even say anything about being there. He just said he had an office at the World Trade Center. Well, I ate a sandwich once in front of the World Trade Center. So does that qualify me as being an expert on the day? I mean. So these arguments are supposed to be immediate conversation stoppers. You're supposed to just kind of suck your breath and be quiet and ignore science. I mean, and as we were talking earlier, you made the comment, you were there, but what about science?
Exactly. And it didn't seem to matter to him. That was more of and I'll share. There were two individuals that I three, I guess we had a total, in a full day, 3 people oppose our message. One is a person that always comes by, and we didn't put much mind to him. We've seen this guy for years. Every year he hated us years ago, and he just opposes. He was a Bush supporter, and he opposes us more from a political standpoint. If we were saying that Obama did it, he would have no problems with that, if you know what I mean. But the other 2 were interesting. One was the person I just mentioned. One was a firefighter who just reacted emotionally to us being there, didn't offer any counter arguments or anything. He just said, "I was there. How dare you do what you're doing?" And he eventually left and all that. But we had one other person that a different type of opposition, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, and it's some of the people that gravitate to these debunking sites. And in my opinion, this is almost like a religion almost. They are actually trained to not accept the 9/11 message. And I don't know if I shared it with on the show when I was on the show, but I'll share it now. You have 9/11 is a very different issue from some of the other issues that are out there, as you know. And I remind people that with 9/11, it is different from other issues that are going on in the world that are corruption issues or conspiracy issues, in that people are actually trained to not believe 9/11 truth. And you can't say that about other issues. People are actually trained by the control system to not believe the evidence. So when you run into that element, it is fascinating. Some of these people gravitate to the, as I understand, this whole movement of debunking and what is it, I think we'll throw his name out there, the Michael Shermer skeptic kind of mindset, and these debunking sites where being a skeptic in and of itself is the skill. So it's essentially they're saying, I'm a professional skeptic, and I'm declaring that your 9/11 truth, your science, is debunked because I'm a specialist at being a skeptic. And these skeptic individuals, when you confront them, they, in their argument, you are diseased because you actually are one of those truthers who we, by default, have decided, and we are absolutely convinced that you guys are wrong, and you're just this diseased group of people that is called conspiracy theorists. And that in and of itself is the argument, the skeptical mindset, which my counter argument is that is in itself a cult or a belief system that is perpetuated and trained. And these guys are being actually conditioned and reconditioned and further deeply conditioned to not believe 9/11 truth. So that interaction is a little different because this individual, I was holding one of the nanothermite papers in my hand, and I said, "Do you know what a scientific paper is?" This is it, and I'm showing him the thermite chips from the electron micrograph chips, and I'm showing him some of the graphs of the paper, and he said, "That's just a piece of paper." And then I held one of the scientific method AE cards that shows the step-by-step, and I said, "Sports have rules. Baseball has rules, football has rules, soccer has rules, and science also has rules. Those set of rules, among other things, it's identified as the so-called scientific method. These are the actual rules to science," to which, again, he had nothing but insulting responses to these factual statements. So that's another class of opposition that I find. I like to separate the different types of oppositions, as opposed to the other individual that I mentioned, who was nothing more than an emotional reaction to the tabling being there. So that could be as some sort of PTSD sort of reaction. He may have internalized an opposition to the movement. Who knows? Maybe back in 2001. And that internalizing of the opposition, those feelings that he has against the movement, and the idea that anyone would challenge the official story, he has perhaps internalized that in such a way where it meshes with his internal feelings, the conflict that arises emotionally with regard to the event itself. Who knows what he went through in the event. So somehow this all was triggered by the sight of a table that offers the science and the truth of 9/11. So different kind of reaction there, more emotional.
Exactly. We run into that a lot doing this, reaching out to people, and I talked about it last week on this show. I shared a story about overhearing somebody talk about her boyfriend coming back from Iraq, and she just kind of casually mentioned that she has to cut her food for him, and because he had been hit with a roadside bomb and it sustained some injuries. And I think about these soldiers, especially who have been wounded, or people who may have either who have lost a loved one in the wars, and they want to believe that, well, they died over something noble. They died in pursuit of avenging this horrible crime that people from another land, these boogeymen from other countries, perpetuated on us. And they don't want to challenge that worldview. They don't want to challenge that myth that they are under. They don't want, even just focusing on the building destructions, which we do on this show, they don't want to think that there's anything more than what they were told, because if there is anything more to the story, then that means that they've been lied to this entire time, and all those systems and individuals on TV that they trusted to give them the full story have let them down, and then that's going to challenge their entire worldview and send them down the rabbit hole even further. And where we see a lot of this is in the calls that have been going into C-SPAN over the last 7 or so months. And I sent you some videos of that before. I don't know if you had a chance to preview them. I know you may have seen a couple. But what do you think about some of these politicians, if you did see it, what do you think about some of these politicians' responses to direct questions about the scientific evidence?
Well, I haven't had a chance to see any of the videos, first of all. But, I think the politicians have a commitment to, A, keeping their job, first of all, and whatever else comes after that. But in order to keep their job, it just doesn't do them very good for their chances of keeping the job by acknowledging the truth of what we know, at least about the evidence with regard to 9/11. So without seeing the videos, what it is, they're in an awkward position, as you know, to where they have to sidestep the questions and hope to move on. They have no interest and no advantages in entertaining the questions. And that's kind of where we are. I hope that we can move closer to some sort of criminal investigation. I know there's books being put out and articles and people are starting to talk about, another 19 and all this stuff, and all these different names are being put out that America should be aware of. We shared some of that information in our outreach, but just to get people, we have to move in this direction at some point. I know that's certainly not the mission of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, and not everyone is involved in this kind of movement, or I should say in that effort. But I hope to see that someone will pursue that, and we will start to do what we need to do as a humanity, never mind as a movement, to start creating that platform for, I guess you could say, for indictments of individuals, individuals that are at least major suspects in the destruction of the towers and some of the other things that happened that day. So I hope that we can move forward in that direction.
Well, that's a question people always ask, and we're walking a fine line all the time, because you don't want to come off as seeming like you have a political agenda when you're talking about the evidence. So and I am a big, strong advocate of just sticking to the science. And even though I have my own opinions, very well-educated opinions, on who I think was responsible, I try not to go there myself, just simply because it seems to turn people off, and I want them to at least look at Building 7 and say, at the very least, it's a little weird, it should be reinvestigated. And right there, I have that person right where I want them, because a new investigation is the most rational thing you could ask for. Why not have a new investigation? Address the controversy surrounding this giant building that just fell. And what's funny, too, just a quick side note, is I've noticed this, is that even if you just mention the word Building 7, people who are stuck in the cognitive dissonance, they'll immediately jump to the defensive and say, I don't think it was an inside job. All you got to say is Building 7. You don't even have to say anything about it. It's just that word, Building 7, has already put that in their mind. So what the movement, especially the scientific truth movement about 9/11 has done, is managed to put this large mark on the official story, so that, just the mention of a simple building, of an aspect of that day, causes people to immediately jump to that conclusion and like I said, take the defensive. So it's really drawn a question mark on the entire story that we were sold by the media that day. And the media has played a large hand in shaping that public narrative. Like you said, you were talking about how people have been trained to immediately not want to take in the information, to not even want to look at it objectively, and that is really interesting. I never even thought about that before until you said that. What do you think of the media's role now? Have you seen it? Have you seen it strengthen or diminish in the past couple of years? What have you observed from the media? What's changed from where we were a couple of years ago?
I observing the media, I guess you can say that there has been victories that have been won. It seems you're seeing more people breaking away from networks, or so-called being fired from certain networks, major voices on TV. And it seems there's certainly a growing of the so-called alternative media. We have seen, as we always do, when one party's in charge, the other party sort of has a semi-awakening. I remember back in 2008 and 07, 08, boy, it was not very difficult to tune into one of the liberal channels, the NBCs and all that, and have one person after another throwing stones at the corrupt government for their illegal wars, and on and on and on. And then as soon as the other party's in charge, then the other party wakes up. It's always the party that's not in control is always the upset party who then is willing to speak up about certain things. So I think with that usual cycle going on. You now have a lot more people on the right and the conservatives realizing that they have diminishing rights, and as a result of that, you're seeing different individuals and media crossing over, calling themselves alternative media, people starting their own shows and all that. I'm thinking of Glenn Beck as I'm talking here, who we brought up his name quite a few times, didn't we, in some of the old shows. And, and before we go any further, I don't think that at least we're not seeing networks that are willing to report so-called all of the truth, and I don't even know that there is such a thing. So any one of these voices can be considered so-called controlled opposition. I'll take the deal. I'm all in favor of people coming together or people putting information out, even if they don't understand or put out all of the truth. Because, Andy, one of the things that I'm observing is that people are waking up, obviously, but when it comes to media and solutions for the problems of the world, I was at a conference, in fact, not too long ago out here in L.A. It was called L.A. versus NSA, and I know this is not necessarily related to 9/11, although it sure is if we break it down. But in the conference, they were talking about how people have to be able to come together. That is, people that are into the Democrats have to, at some point, be able to put aside their differences and be able to reach out to Republicans and vice versa. People are realizing now that it's not just two parties, and people are going to have to put aside their political differences to come together to solve the major problems that we face. So to kind of go back to your original question, I think media, it's moving forward in a positive way, in my opinion, although certainly the censorship certainly continues, and it certainly continues regarding 9/11. But I think that with more and more alternative media, I think that the mainstream media is losing their audience. And I think it's been documented. They're losing their audience every day, and more people are catching on and jumping on board with other alternative media sources. And as long as that continues to happen, more and more people are going to wake up. And at the local level also, you see a lot of truth coming out, stories coming out that are just waking more and more people up. So that's a good sign.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's funny you talk about how mainstream media is losing popularity, and really to stay relevant, folks like Glenn Beck, who were claiming that 9/11 truth was going to kill the president and all these terrible things, and I haven't seen him come out for 9/11 truth, but he has come out towards the Ron Paul supporters, another group he had labeled as potential terrorists, or he had inferred it on his program. Now he's embracing them like he's some kind of libertarian champion or something. And I think it's funny, but he if he puts out some good information, fine. But I take it with a grain of salt. But I think it's funny that Fox News will call itself or what it'll call the rest of the media, the mainstream media. I've seen them do that, and they'll say, "Oh, the mainstream media won't tell you this." Like Fox News is somehow outside of that box. Like they're the champions of the people, and they're the people that were demonizing us the most back in the dark days of the mid 2000s and 2008 and all of that. And they had to stay relevant. They have to emulate the alternative media, and it goes back to a point that I've talked about a lot of times on this show, where we need to stop looking for validation from these so-called mainstream sources. And the story I use is a buddy that wants to be a filmmaker and go out to Hollywood, but it didn't quite work out that way for him in life, and he was content with saying, well, I'll just teach and all of that. And I say, well, to him, why don't you just make your movies and put them on the internet or find some way of getting it out yourself? Let Hollywood come to you. Make your own system. Don't worry about the validation of Hollywood. Just do it on your own. And I think we as a movement, alternative news movement, have done that, is where we don't even care what the so-called mainstream media says. We don't even call it the mainstream media anymore. We call it the corporate media, because we are the mainstream media. People are listening to programs like this one as opposed to whatever talking head gets thrown up on the television screen, at the current time. And they will try to stay relevant by, covering some issues, or at least gracing them, but they know they can't go all the way, because that will establish or rock the entire establishment. Now, we've got another year coming here, and New Year's Day will be a few days away when this airs on No Lies Radio on Thursday night. A lot of momentum is on our side, and I really feel that the battle is turning slowly towards a great awakening. I see it with the people I talk to. Now, so what should be done in the next year? What should the movement do? What should individuals do in the next year? In your opinion, where should their energies be focused in trying to get this truth realized?
Well, as you know, Andy, what's happening in the world, unfortunately, 9/11 is just a portion of it. And I have always said that if 9/11 doesn't wake you up, well, hell, maybe let's look at some other topics that will wake you up. And we mentioned this before. You can always count on people's wallets as being one of the points, one of the areas that'll wake them up. When their wallets are affected, or when prices of food goes too high, or when you now know that your very phone calls are being recorded by the NSA. So, and I could go on all the issues. So I think one of the, and it kind of ties into your other question about the media and just overall, I guess we're talking, people are waking up, as you said, and they're waking up because of different reasons, and they're seeing the corruption, and they're seeing the power being shifted to one side, and there's people dealing with educational issues and homeschooling issues. You have all the controversies surrounding Obamacare and what people will be forced to do. And you have people seeing their money devalued, and you look at the economy, people that are unemployed, and student loans, and it just goes on and on and on. So those issues are all part of the awakening. And there's some issue for every person that will touch you. So as things get worse, things will, in a way, get better in terms of coming to a solution, because as more people wake up, more people will start to realize what I said a minute ago, and that they're going to have to put aside their differences and start finding new ways of solving these problems. The conference that I went to a few weeks ago focused on state sovereignty, and 10th Amendment Center promoted this conference, and the idea that people are going to have to redefine how things are done and how the power to the state is given, and the people, every single person has a say in that. And as the awakening continues, what we're going to see, to answer your question, as moving forward in 2014 and on, I think that we need to focus on solutions. It's not as much about forcing an issue on someone or forcing them to wake up to a certain issue of your choice. If someone doesn't see 9/11, maybe they'll just understand that the purpose behind 9/11 is much greater than what happened that day, and maybe they'll start seeing that now that your phone calls are being recorded and all your data is being saved, and information is going to fusion centers and all that, maybe we're in trouble here. So what's happening is people are realizing that. And even people who may not even tie it into 9/11, they still may not understand what we're trying to say to them about 9/11, but they're realizing that something's wrong. And if that's what it takes for people to wake up, then so be it. Because in the end, we're all a humanity. We're all in this together. And these problems are not just about one event or one single thing. If you follow the money and the whole central banking scheme that 100 years ago, this week was the creation of the Federal Reserve, and without getting into all that. But people are starting to see this, and that's part of the awakening. So moving forward, people are going to realize, and hopefully more sooner rather than later, that they're going to have to put aside their political differences because the control system relies on division. They want to keep the people divided by skin color, by religion, all kinds of political belief systems. Bush versus Obama, all these presidents, and all this stuff going on, just to keep people divided. And so the key to moving forward in solutions is to put aside your differences and work together on the solutions. And it does start, in my opinion, is by focusing on small government, minimizing government, and bringing the power back to the people at a local level. And I'm talking about at the city level and at the state level, and then kind of work with your city and work with your state and lawmakers at that level. And the smaller the level, the more effect you will have on making a change.
Right, and anybody could do that out there. The people around you are the people that you have the immediate access to, and like with the issue of 9/11, the resources are available to you. You can go to rethink911.org and get things to give to your local state politicians, your local city politicians, or police officers. Obviously, we have the facts that went out to the police chiefs earlier on in this year, and it's right there, ae911truth.org/police. You just go there and print that out. It's a letter from Richard Gage to your local law enforcement. And will 9/11 be busted wide open overnight? No, but at least you plant the seed for that person later on. And so if some other issue comes up, like what Bernie's talking about with the NSA listening to their phone, they're going to think about that, and they're going to think about 9/11. And speaking of 9/11, well, look at this building that fell in 6.5 seconds. Buildings don't do that because of fire. No steel frame high-rise ever collapsed that way before or after that day. And it's these little facts that will stick in their brain and influence the future. And I think
Andy,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I just maybe I shouldn't have interrupted. You seemed like you were going good there, but I call it the moment. I call it I call it the truthers were right moment. The truthers were right. When people realize that something else is so, oh my God, the truthers were, it's kind of retroactive awakening to 9/11. But go on.
Well, I love how Geraldo, and props to Geraldo, he had Tony Zimbodi and Bob McIlvain on the program after the Remember Building 7 ads aired in New York. That caught Geraldo's attention, and he brought him on. But there's a line in that, because Geraldo, before that, had been protested. He was doing an outside interview with some women over some fluff issues, and 9/11 Truth people showed up and were in the background, and Geraldo was a little miffed by that. But then afterwards, after the Remember Building 7 ads ran, he had him on the show. But I thought it was a funny line where he said something, and I don't want to misquote. I can't remember the exact quote off the top of my head, but he said something like, up until now, only nut jobs believed this. And really, what had changed? Well, no, it's just that now Geraldo was awakened to it momentarily. So it wasn't that only nut jobs believed it. It's just that he was wrong. And but it's good that he can admit that he was wrong. He didn't say I was wrong, but he kind of admitted that by bringing Bob and Tony on. So again, props to him. I'm not rubbing his face in it or anything, but I call Building 7 and 9/11 Truth and the science of 9/11 Truth the basic math. It's like the 1 + 1 = 2 that you need to learn first before you start learning algebra and physics and all these other sciences that are math based. And that's something that we can all unite under because it is the science. Now, in our last couple of minutes here, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with our audience, anything that gives you hope, anecdotes, something like that to leave our audience with, that to look forward to the year 2014 and send them charging forward into this battle?
Well, I'm not a fortune teller or anything, but it kind of goes along with what I said already. that we are experiencing these patterns throughout history. If you read history and kind of see how these things work, these things move slow. Humanity has its own conscience, and people are waking up thanks to the information age. That can't be stopped. And the opposition has all these mechanisms of controlling what people perceive. But perception is something that we have to keep in mind, because this is what it's all about. It's all about perceptions. I mentioned propaganda and Edward Bernays earlier, but really that's why I think the Rethink 9/11 campaign is so successful, has been successful, and it's such a great idea. We are in an information war, and we are beings who operate by consciousness, and we are easy to influence, and people are having their buttons pushed by these images, media, and entertainment, and all that. So moving forward, the information is just going to get crazier, and more is coming out. And because of that, I think that we have to kind of step back and see how humanity normally deals with this. And I think that with more and more people becoming awake, and with the draconian laws that are being passed, when you try to take freedom away from people, that tends to wake people up. So I believe in humanity, and I think that things are going to get better, but maybe not before it gets worse. And just judging from my personal experience, talking to people out there at school, and just being out there in the streets, there are a lot of people that are awakened. And as long as we continue to search for new solutions to defeat the control system that's in place now, with new peaceful solutions that are focused on cooperation, loving one another, just reaching out to your neighbor and your friends, and reaching out to others, and be willing to work together on solutions. I just think that will be it's something that's just going to grow. And when people are in tough situations, they tend to, psychology shows, people tend to come together and work together towards a solution. And I think that we're going to continue seeing that. And that includes everyone, including people that are part of the system. They know what's going on too, people that are in media and in government. So there's a lot of good people that do work for the government, and good people that work for media who mean well. You know, and good people who work in the military. And because those people are out there waking those people up, and they are waking up, and as I'm sure you know, that gives us all a lot of hope.
Bernie Suarez, thank you for coming back on 9/11 Freefall.
Thanks for listening. Remember, you can hear this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download the show from 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.